Is Jim here tonight?
I don't see him.
I don't see him either. Okay, so since Jim isn't here, then I'll go ahead with this election stuff, even though I'm on the slate that's being elected. So you can see here that we are electing for the 2-year terms. We announced the slate of officers at the last meeting, and this is the slate that is now being presented to you for an official vote. So you can see president is me, Tammy is vice president, Sandy Townsend is secretary, and Michelle Hoffman-Werble is treasurer. And the board members who are up for their 2-year terms are Megan Campbell, Mary Keith, Sherry Keller, and Lucy Pollock. So the board members who are serving the 2nd year of their 2-year terms are not to be elected tonight, but what the bylaws requires us to do is to try to, instead of changing boards over completely every year, we keep at least some people who know what the heck is going on the board at all times. That really does help in terms of our capacity to keep the work of the society underway. So that being said, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second because we're going to need to have a motion to accept the slate of officers as presented. Do we have a motion?
To accept the slate of officers as presented.
Okay, that's Lois. Hi, Lois. And we need a second to the motion.
A second.
Erwin is the second. And so is there any further discussion about the election of these officers?
When
In
we
that
vote-
case,
When we
in that
vote,
case-
everybody, you have to hold your thumb up or do a sign. Give me a moment because I'm recording and I got to go through all the participants here. I can't see everyone on my screen at one time. So, and
so
go
if
ahead and
you
call for the
go,
vote.
if you go down to the bottom, there's a reaction. You can do a reaction choice and you can do a thumbs up or raise your hand or something like that. All in favor of this slate of officers, please vote one way or the other. So, and Mick, you'll let me know when you've done it.
Most people have voted. We got several people who are not showing any kind of reaction, but all the ones that are reacting have a thumbs up or an emoji.
Okay, all right, so now if everyone would take your thumb down or whatever.
Jim signing in.
Okay, and is there anyone who is voting again? Oh, hi, Jim. We started. Sorry.
I'm sorry, apologize.
That's all right. No problem. So is there anyone who is not in favor of this slate of officers? If you would, do a thumbs down or whatever you want to do. So it looks as though the slate has been elected. And I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who agrees to be on the board of the Tampa Audubon Society. It's a great society and we love it and we're glad to be here. And thank you. And I just want to point out a number of the board members are actually at the meeting today. So it's Jim's here, Lucy's here, me, and Jessica. Let's see who else. Just trying to see who else is here. Mick, of course, and I guess that's all. Okay, so I'm going to start to share my screen again, if I can. Let's try to do it. Okay. Can you see the screen again that I'm sharing, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good, so. All right, so we've got some field trips coming up. We ask people to be vaccinated and also to register in advance. And if the wind is really calm and it's too close, you might need to wear a mask, so bring one. But we do have both for May and June beginning bird walks at Lettuce Lake Park. These are always fun. I encourage you to come to those. Then we have a really good field trip being led by Lillian. Lillian, thank you so much for taking us to these new places that you are. This one will be a very nice walk and about 4 miles of a loop at the Connor Preserve on the 15th. That's actually, it should say Sunday. I think that's Sunday. That's my mistake. It should be May 15th, Sunday. So, and then we have Mick. Mick, are you leading that trip with anybody else?
No, Charlie's leading. I'm just coordinating.
Oh,
Charlie's leader.
Charlie's leading the field trip to the Lower Green Swamp, and this is one of the great destinations. I think everybody needs to go there. We'll really have a great time there. So glad to have Charlie do that for us. Thank you, Charlie. And then again, the beginning bird walk at Lettuce Lake Park. Migratory Bird Day is coming up. It's going to be next week, the Saturday, the 14th. So one of the things National Audubon Society is working on is trying to make the lights darker across the United States, because birds migrate by night and the lights can tend to confuse them. So this is an interesting program, one we're not working on yet, but maybe we'll have a volunteer want to pick this up and help us do it in the Tampa area. So, but very interesting Migratory Bird Day, something to really celebrate on a continent-wide basis. And of course, in Tampa Bay, we're right in the middle of it. So it's pretty exciting. Just want to point out, I've pointed this out at several meetings before. Tampa Audubon has funded these 3 videos, but I just want to point out that now we're actually entered into the Florida Environmental Film Festival. So this is a way to get our word out across the state, as well as, you know, with the other chapters and so on. And so we're pretty excited about being part of the film festival. Pretty neat. So if you haven't seen these videos, go online and watch them, because we've done this. This is something we're trying to do to protect the pelicans and the other birds that get entangled, and something that we can do to make a difference. So various things coming up that we need some volunteers for. This Saturday, Jessica's could use some more people at the booth for the Healing Art of Nature exhibit at the Franciscan Center. And then Mary and Doug and others and Mick are leading these bird surveys at the Schultz Nature Preserve, Piney Point, or the Frog Creek Restoration Project. So to be involved with them with that, please do that. And then of course, the Native Plant Society does gardening at Lettuce Lake Park in the beautiful garden, which is actually shown here. And then Terry is headed up an activity at the Lettuce Lake Park as well, at the Joel Jackson Nature Center. And this is to have docents be at the park to answer questions from the visitors and help visitors there at the park on weekends and holidays. So if you'd like to do that, absolutely do that. And if you want to come and talk to me, I'll be there this Saturday, and you can see what it's like in the afternoon, noon until 4 or 5. Colony Watch is something that's ongoing, and Tammy Lyons is heading this up for us. Project Burrow is another thing we're working on. And this is very exciting work, trying to promote burrowing owls nesting in our area as well. Now, one thing that has come up with Project Burrow is that people are kind of overwhelming a pair that we have enticed to nest and probably have eggs at least in our area at one of our Project Burrow sites. And we're really worried because too many people are going there. They're blocking driveways. If the residents who live next to it get too annoyed, we're concerned that they might hurt the birds to make the bird watchers go away. So what we're asking is that we keep that pretty quiet and maybe don't even go there. Well, let's let the birds raise their family. But we're excited that they like our burrows that we've created for them. And I promoted this last week too, or last month too, but this is really an important idea that the Avian Research and Conservation Institute is doing to help us monitor swallowtail kites in the area. I think all of us cheer every year when the swallowtail kites return from their winter in Argentina, and it's great to have them around now. And every time I see one, I'm just so excited. Such a beautiful animal. So if we can help promote their survival in Florida, I think this is something that we'll all be happy with. Our bluebird projects just grow and grow. So if this is something you want to help with, get in touch with Mary. But the other thing is repairing the boxes and keeping things working there does have a cost to it. So it might be something that you'd like to participate in financially, if not out in the field with Mary and Sherry and the others who are working on this. So very excited about the bluebird work that Tampa Audubon's doing and has been doing for several years. Wanted to let you know that the Florida Young Birders Club, which is partly being sponsored by Tampa Audubon, went out with Mark and Mark Rochelle and Jeff Likey, and had a good day out at the Alafia Bank. Wanted to also give the word that we do have avian flu, which is a virus in our region. And so if you come across any sick or dead birds, don't handle them. There's not much evidence, or none, that the virus spreads to people, but we don't want to take any chances. If you do see sick or dead birds, it's probably a good idea to close down your feeders and bird baths for a while. But in the meantime, cleaning those will really help keep the birds safe. And reporting any sick or dead birds is very important. If you don't have to write this down now, just know that it's on our website in the newsletter, and you can get this information from the newsletter on our website too. So really excited. We extended our talk series to one more month. We just couldn't help it, because what happened is the folks who went on our Belize trip started to talk about how much fun they had, and that we want to hear all the details. And that's what our next meeting in June is going to be all about. So hope you can join us for that. And that is the end of my announcements. So
Anne, can I make a comment?
please.
We started at 9 o'clock at Lettuce Lake on a walk through the area, through the boardwalk and so forth. It's a 2-hour tour of the park, not just the garden.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. Right. And that's right. With the Native Plant Society, that's a really fun walk, and you learn so much and see so much, not, plants, but also birds and other wildlife. It's just really, Lettuce Lake is just such a joy to be there. So at this point, Mick, if you could give Charlie okay, he has. So Charlie, it's entirely my pleasure and joy to introduce you. Charlie has served with me on a couple of important projects over time. One being the Florida Ornithological Society, where he has just left being the treasurer after having done that for several years. And glad to say the society is financially in good shape and working on some really interesting things. And then also he is the treasurer for the Florida Birding and Nature Festival, which will be coming up in October 20th through 23rd. So don't make any other plans because you definitely don't want to miss that. October 20th through 23rd. But, it's just really a great thing to be able to turn to Charlie and get so much help. And he's also leading the field trip out to the Lower Green Swamp coming up. So if you haven't had a chance to be in the field with Charlie, this is your chance. So with that, Charlie, thank you for giving our talk tonight. And I'll turn this over and let you get underway with it.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the Lower Green Swamp trip as well. And I saw that we're gonna hold it to an under 2 mile trip. I will confess that the last time I took a group out to Lower Green Swamp, I didn't pay attention, and I was a bad leader, and I took us all on a 9 mile hike. It was awesome. I felt great. We all made it, but we're going to keep it way under 9 miles on the 21st. I am not the world's greatest Zoom expert, so I'm super glad that that Mick is here helping. Do I have the capability to share screen at this point, or?
Yes, you do.
Right.
So
Oh, I wish there was a button that said share screen.
there's a little green button at the bottom of your black area for the Zoom.
You may have to move your mouse to see it.
I think I found it. I got to decide what screen I'm going to share.
Thank you.
There you go. You're sharing, Charlie.
What do you guys see, if I may ask?
We see the opening of your slideshow, but not the show itself. We're seeing your PowerPoint get ready to start the show.
Okay, let me move up. No, I'm going to have to. I know what I want to do.
So
Sorry about this, everybody. It won't take long. I want to share my other screen.
Okay.
So I've moved my PowerPoint over to the screen that I want to share so that I can look at the camera when I'm talking to you all. And so I think I need to share this screen. Now, do you see my my PowerPoint view again?
Yes.
All right. Now I'm going to put it in PowerPoint mode. And now you just sort of see a slideshow?
Yes.
Well, it's got some stuff on the bottom, but maybe that's okay.
You see the presenter notes.
Yeah, we're seeing your presenter, not your dual monitor. What you're showing us is the presenter view.
Hide presenter view.
Yeah.
So usually you see the red bar at the top there,
Yes.
Charlie. Okay, go to slideshow. It's like the 4th choice or 6th choice across the red bar.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then go left to the from beginning. It should do from beginning.
Charlie,
know
your
why
dual
it's not.
monitor.
I am.
Okay, what you're sharing is not the presentation, you're sharing your view. So leave that run and go back to leave it in that run and go back to share, stop the share. And select the other monitor. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. But then I won't be able to look at you guys in the eye.
That's right. That's the price of leadership, man. You gotta trust your following.
All right.
Try minimizing that. It was actually showing there for a second.
Try minimizing this.
Yeah, minimize, yeah. There, now we see your presentation and we see you at the top of our screens. You're ready to go. Except actually we're seeing your desktop, not
Well,
your
you know what?
presentation.
I'm just gonna be looking off to the side, I guess, a little bit.
No, we're
when I
we're
talk.
seeing,
That's
we're
the-
not seeing your presentation, Charlie. We're still seeing your main computer desktop with you alongside someone at the NFL trophy.
Got it.
So stop the share and then hit share again right away. And then when you do this, that share, select the screen with the presentation.
Yeah, I would like that presentation to be on my,
You can
Little
stop,
screen.
you can set your presentation and take it out of presenter view and put it in mirror mode too.
that's probably what I want to do. So. Mirror mode. View.
They may use a different word. I'm not on a dual monitor right now.
Yeah. All right.
So if you start your presentation and then toggle, there you go. Now we see RFS, Riley Fisher, Certified Public Accountants. Try that. Okay, now we're seeing your actual PowerPoint project.
Hello, Virgil. Hello, buddy. Come on. Come on. Come on, Virgil. Come.
So you're gonna need, everybody, we're gonna need to mute ourselves except for Charlie. And maybe me, because I talk a lot.
I think I'm just gonna have to look off to the side.
Yep,
It's just gonna be the way to, so, but you can't see my presentation right now, that's right?
We
no, we're
see,
seeing RFS.
Okay.
Now your presentation,
All right.
we-
but you need to choose on the red bar slideshow and
You-
from beginning.
It seems to be,
He
again,
doesn't want to
going
do
off.
it.
You need to hit the resume slideshow. It's paused.
Resume.
I couldn't find a list called publics. Should I create one?
Zoom slideshow.
Okay.
It's right under the slideshow button that was in the red bar.
Right here,
Yeah, now look below. Doesn't it say resume slideshow? 'Cause I
from
can
current
see it on my
slide.
screen.
Shopping list.
Oh, yeah, it does. There you see
you're
resume
still sharing,
slideshow.
Charlie, you're sharing the presenter's view, not the show. Is the show running on one of your monitors?
Yeah,
Okay, you're sharing the wrong monitor. Click the share button again. Leave your presentation going. Go to the monitor you're not sharing the show on, stop your share. And then you'll restart the share and select it. There you go, you're in it now.
Oh, you did
Okay.
it.
so again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be looking off to the side, but I don't seem to be able to get away from looking off to the side, so I'm just gonna have to live with that. So tonight's presentation is regarding citizen science projects. And I was thinking about, well, what am I gonna share or discuss about citizen science projects? I'm not a scientist. I'm a CPA. I'm a business guy, but I love being involved in citizen science projects as a birder. I've found them very fulfilling and interesting, and I thought, well, what I should do is pick a selection of the citizen science projects that I've been most involved with and most excited about, and tell you about them. So I thought that I would pick these four. So I'm gonna discuss in sequence the Christmas Bird Count, which is the original, the great granddaddy of the citizen science projects. Started really not as a science project at all, but we'll talk about that as well. Then the breeding bird survey, which got started a lot later than the Christmas Bird Count, but has now been going since 1966 and was designed originally and avowedly from the get-go as a science project. Then a much newer and more recent science project, citizen science project, the eBird project, which is a project that probably a lot of you are probably most of you are, if not all of you, are familiar with, and some of you probably use it pretty avidly. We will talk about that project as well, and I'll talk about some of my personal experiences with it. And then a project that's particularly near and dear to my heart. It was just several years in length as opposed to something that's permanent, but it was the second Florida Breeding Bird Atlas project. And we completed the field work a number of years ago, and it's really starting to look like it's going to come to a very exciting conclusion for at least for this field participant. So those are the 4 projects I'm going to talk about. There are lots of other ones. There are winter shorebird projects. There are survey projects at Duet Preserve going on right now. All kinds of interesting things to get involved with, but I thought these 4 were interesting and illustrative for us to dig into. So to give it some structure, oh man. Oh, I see my buttons now for advancing the project. Okay, so for each of the projects, now we're gonna cover 4 things. We're gonna talk about the history of the project, kind of how it got started, and then I thought for each one we ought to take a little time and talk about the structure and protocol of the project. How is it run? Either from a governance perspective or just from a boots on the ground perspective. How do you do this particular project? Then I wanted to take a little time and just talk about my own involvement and personal history with the project, what I enjoyed about it, what I feel like I've gotten out of it and am getting out of it, and how it's made me a more informed person or a better birder. And then for each of the projects, although this is far and away not my area of expertise, I wanted to at least do a little bit of internet research and share with you what I could find out about the scientific output of the project, how the data has been used. And for some of the projects, that's easier to find out. They publicize it more. And for some of the projects, less straightforward. And for some, we're really just at the beginning, like Florida Breeding Bird Atlas 2. So to continue, so that's our structure. We're going to talk about 4 projects: Christmas Bird Count, North American Breeding Bird Survey, eBird, and the Florida Breeding Bird Atlas 2. And for each of the projects, we're going to have a discussion of the history of the project, the structure and protocol that put the meat on the project, a few comments about my involvement and personal history and what I've liked, what I've enjoyed about them, and then some comments on the scientific output and how the data that is thus generated is used in the scientific and/or conservation community. So starting first with the oldest and the original, the Christmas Bird Count, the history, and some of you may be familiar with this history, but we'll get into it for those who haven't heard it before. The Christmas Bird Count was begun in 1900. So 1900 was technically still the 18th century. And so this count's been around a long time. So since it started in 1900, there's a quick little trick you can do, because the Christmas Bird Count that you're involved with for a particular year is often given as the number of the count. So if you subtract 1 and then kind of turn it into the year, that kind of gives you the year of that particular count. So if you're talking about count number 119, that was the count that mostly took place at the end of 2018. There's the first 5 days of the next year can be included. So the gentleman that started the Christmas Bird Count was the editor of what was then Audubon's lead magazine called Bird Lore. And there was a well-established Christmas tradition at that time for our country of a side hunt, for those who wish to participate. And at a time when our country probably seemed to have limitless resources and many acres of land and tons of wild animals, a side hunt where the participants took up on sides, 1, 2, or 3, and it would then have a competition against each other to see how many birds or other critters they could bag for the day. And so the winning side killed the most birds. And by 1900, we'd already experienced the first few extinctions that our country had experienced. The Labrador duck was gone by then. The passenger pigeon was on the way out. And people like Frank Chapman saw that and realized it. And so he wanted to have a little bit of a different tradition. How about instead we break up into groups and count as many birds as we can on Christmas Day? Wouldn't that be a better use of our time and our spirit of the love of the outdoors? So he began that tradition, and it really started as a social event as opposed to a scientific enterprise. The very first count, 27 people participated. He also asked in his magazine editorial that people who participated would mail in their results. So 25 groups of a total of 27 people mailed in their results for the first Christmas bird count, and thus a tradition was born. So the rules were pretty loose and free at the beginning. You just counted birds on Christmas Day, but the rules began to evolve, and as they evolved and got more structured, the scientific enterprise rests very carefully on comparability through time and consistency of the data and how the data is gathered. And so the evolution of the count to a more structured approach was important for its scientific evolution as well. So I found this 10-year-old slide at Audubon's site. I'm sure it's more now, but at least as of 2012, we had 60,000 participants in 20 countries, 2,242 circles. It's more than that now. Tens of millions of birds have been reported, and at least as of 2012, 2,400 different species. So at 2,400 different species, you would have to know that more than just the United States is involved in the Christmas Bird Count project. So I should point out that the Christmas Bird Count is a Western Hemisphere project, and there are count circles all throughout South America, Central America, Mexico, the United States, Canada, and then out in the Pacific Islands as well. So the structure and protocol. I don't know when this structure evolved, but the structure that I'm about to describe to you has certainly been in place for many decades at this point. The Christmas Bird Count is held annually in a 15-mile diameter circle. So this circle will be centered and the center recorded in Audubon's database. So when the count is held each year, it's always held in the same circle. The circle does not move around. What you do is you count all of the bird species and individuals that can be found in that circle. You also record some effort data and some data that will relate to how hard it was to find species on that day. So you will record the weather data and whether it was raining cats and dogs or it was fair and still. You record some data with respect to the effort that you've expended to try to find the birds, because that's important. It makes a big difference whether in that 15-mile circle 3 people looked for 3 hours, or if 10 groups of 6 people looked for 11 hours, and each group also spent 1.5 hours before sunrise. And providing that additional effort data is really important to be able to normalize the data statistically when the scientists are using it. Another thing that evolved was while the original Christmas bird count was held precisely on Christmas, over time people held them on different days, and at first this was rather informal. But by the time of, I think it was the 104th Christmas bird count, it was important to establish a specific period of days during which the Christmas bird count can be held. So the Christmas bird count now can only be held on the dates of December 14th through January 5th of each year. And that period is fixed. So there's a 23-day period that the count can land in. Lost my little, there it is, to advance the slide. Thank you all for your patience with me. This next slide shows something that is more or less of a practical reality of the Christmas bird count, as opposed to something that is really inherent and embedded in the structure and protocol of the count itself. You'll note on this slide, again, this one I took from Audubon, that typically each set circle is divided into sectors. So this little map that we're looking at, I think, is a map of maybe it's the Ithaca, New York count or the Cornell University count. I'm not sure what the name would be, but seems to be the count centered around the campus of Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And it looks like, at least at the time that this very nice line drawing was made, they worked with 8 sectors. Again, there's no rhyme or reason to that, and you don't have to divide your circle into sectors, but there is a practical reason for needing to do so, which I will get into. All right. So this is the cruel geometry of the Christmas bird count. So we go back to I don't remember, I guess it was the first year of algebra, which nowadays people take in 7th grade. Seem to be doing it earlier and earlier. And we learned the formula for the area of a circle. The area of a circle is pi times the radius of the circle squared. Pi is this really interesting number that represents the ratio between the diameter of a circle and its circumference. It's a constant, and it is well, it's transcendental. I mean, you can't create it through any algebraic process or any process of making ratios. It's a strange and wonderful number. But anyway, you multiply it by the square of the radius of the circle, and you get the area of the circle. Well, for a 15-mile diameter circle, we have a 7.5-mile radius. You square that number, and then you multiply it by pi, which is 3.1416 or something like that. You get 176.7 square miles, and you have to count all of the birds in a 176.7 square mile area. That is a major task. You really need to break that area up into smaller sub areas and push down the responsibility to sector groups and sector leaders who are going to take care of covering that area, covering it before the sun comes up, and covering at least as many of the accessible parts of that area as you can in order to get the count done for the day. Otherwise, I mean, 176.7 square miles, that is a tall order for 24 hours. Well, once this count had been around and so much data had been accumulated for so many years, It was certainly attractive to scientists to use, but they knew that the database had its limitations. There had been kind of an inconsistent application of the effort data over time, so that was codified and structured. The days on which the counts were held varied and moved around. That was then standardized into to 23 days. A number of recommendations which were accepted were pulled together after the 104th Christmas bird count. That would have been 2003. From a peer review driven panel trying to really get their arms around making the scientific value of the Christmas bird count data set as good as it could possibly be. So there more structure, more organization on the science side. The database is available for everyone to download and use now. And one of the things they really wanted to do was scrub the database at least as far back as 1966, which is a special date that we'll see later on as well. I guess they figured some of the earlier dates were a little hopeless. I'll give you an example of one that I know about. The Tampa Christmas Bird Count from count number 16, which was held on December 26th, 1915. They held out for Boxing Day that year, I guess, told the count. 2015, gosh, it was the early years of World War I, which wouldn't have been called World War I then because they didn't know about the second one. We weren't in the war. But somebody said they had 14 American tree sparrows on that day, and I don't think I believe that. But that's an example of the kind of stuff that you can find if you look at some of the older counts. I think they found sparrows in a tree and they were in America, but I don't know about American tree sparrow. Okay, personal history. I think that the Christmas bird count was the first citizen science project that I was really deeply involved with. And I can't remember how I found out about it, but the first one I ever went on was in December of 2005, not too long after I had taken up birding. And I went out with Dave Bowman, who is this wonderful, nice guy. He was very patient with me as a new birder. I think it was on the Alafia Banks count that I went for my first one. And there was a fellow named Hank that then stayed with us for the next couple of years, and then dropped out. I haven't seen Hank since 2007, I guess. And on my very first Christmas bird count, literally and not exaggerating, my shoes completely fell apart. I had gone out in hiking boots that I'd first worn my freshman year of college, and I guess the glue doesn't last forever that holds the sole on and everything, and they absolutely fell apart. And I think I finished it in some sneakers, which I really came pretty close to ruining. Within a couple of years, I just stayed very enthusiastic about this and was loving it. And Dave decided to allow me to be a sector leader, a leader of one of the little areas of the count circle. And it was on the Tampa Christmas bird count. I think it was 2007, and he let me run the South Tampa sector, which is peninsular Tampa, south of the interstate, down to about Sunset Park on the west side, and I think it dips down a little bit further on the east side, a little bit down the bay shore. But you can't mess up things too badly in that part of town. I'm not going to find any crazy rare birds that I have to explain. Although I did find a Bonaparte's gull on the Little Audubon Preserve property that's I think in Sunset Park. So that was a special bird I found as a South Tampa sector leader. And eventually Dave let me become the compiler of the Alafia Banks count, which I've been doing for about 10 years now. And the compiler coordinates the activities of the sector leaders, helps in recruiting people, and also inputs all of the data that is gathered up into the Audubon database for it to be reviewed by the Florida reviewer, which in Florida is Bill Prantey. So you want to make sure you don't get anything wrong, because he'll find it and you'll hear about it. And that's no fun for him or you. And also, if there are rare birds found, then it's the compiler's job to gather up the information on that sighting. Hopefully there's been a photograph taken or what have you. And then passing that along to Bruce Anderson, who assists Bill Prantey in the rare bird documentation review. So I have enjoyed kind of being involved at different levels of the chain in this particular project. And I think that's been exciting in my development as a birder. So when you like Christmas bird counts, they can add up fast. We have a lot in this area. Florida is pretty rich with them. I added it up and I've been in 96 of them now. 8 different counts. These are all counts in the Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco area. There's the Tampa count, the Alafia Banks count, North Pinellas, St. Petersburg, the Fort DeSoto Christmas bird count, which is a relatively new one. And then there's one in West Pasco, East Pasco, and Arapahoe Bay Hills, which is partly Pasco and partly Hernando County. And another nice thing about the Christmas bird count is it's a very social experience in normal years. You know, the COVID years have been a little different, of course, but in times that we are not touched by a worldwide pandemic, there is often a dinner gathering at the end of the day where you swap some stories and hear at least the tentative numbers for the count. And that social aspect I have enjoyed very much personally as well. So science-wise, this is the biggest and oldest time series database that we have for birds. It might be for any animal type. I mean, going back to 1900, a pretty good winter survey like this, same time of year after year, through times that have changed so much, 1900 through now. That's pretty valuable information. It was certainly very helpful in the 2019 Science article that Ken Rosenberg and many other co-authors authored, using some of that old data and eBird data and radar data and the breeding bird survey data that we'll talk about a little bit later, to conclude, unfortunately, that we've lost 3 billion birds, or 29% of all birds in North America since 1970. Jeff LeBaron, who runs the CBC, indicates that at least at the time that he wrote a website on this matter, that over 300 peer-reviewed articles came from CBC analysis. And then it's used pretty heavily by federal agencies and conservation organizations for decision-making purposes. The database was apparently also pretty important data backup and support for the more recent Audubon study that has indicated that birds are being specifically affected by global warming and climate change. In particular, that their winter ranges are demonstrably moving north. The next one, I'll try to go a little faster. The next one, this is the North American Breeding Bird Survey. It has a shorter history than the Christmas bird count. It was launched by a young biologist named Chandler Robbins in 1966. I think Chan Robbins passed away within the last 5 or so years. He lived to 98 and got to see his database really grow over time. He was a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service guy at the Patuxent, Maryland unit, which has become the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center. And I believe that he worked there for much of his career. When it got started in 1966, they started pretty big with 600 surveys all east of the Mississippi. And within a couple of years, they were over 1,000 east and west of the Mississippi. There are now 3,700 routes in the US and Canada, and they have been doing them in Mexico now as well since 2008. So this is a little smaller. It's not all of the Western Hemisphere, and certainly for much of its history, it was just the United States and Canada, but it's starting to grow some as well. Those 3,700 routes don't get covered every year. It's typically about 3,000 a year, apparently. And this is a long time series data set created not in the winter, but in a different time of year. So it makes a nice contrast with the ever-growing Christmas bird count data set, because this is a late spring and summer breeding season survey. And since it started in 1966, I propose to you that that's the reason that getting the Christmas bird count data set really, really clean back to 1966, that's the driving reason for picking that date, so that it would really match up well against the breeding bird survey data. The U.S. Geological Survey and the Canadian Wildlife Service run the North American Breeding Bird Survey. There is there's an agency in Mexico also that runs the survey that got started in Mexico in 2008. I didn't put their name up here. So how does this one work? How does the structure and protocol of this thing work? So there is a route that is established, and every year you cover that route identically. The route starts at the same place and time, same place and same time. By that, I mean the same time of day. So for the ones that I do, they have to start at 6:02 in the morning, not before, not after. And I will go to the same place where I have been running them, since I started. And it's an automobile-based survey. So it's from a scientific perspective, it's a little bit skewed toward the kind of habitats that you would have near a roadside. But scientists are clever, so they can figure out ways to unscramble that egg. And the idea is that you make a stop every half mile from your start, at least as close as you can. The stops can be adjusted a little bit based on impossibility. If you just literally were not able to stop at that half mile place, or if it just became manifestly unsafe, then there are ways of moving the spots for safety. But then once those spots are established, you're really not supposed to ever change them. You're supposed to go back to the same spot, even if it looks like it would be so much nicer birding to go another 150 yards down the road. You don't do that. You stop and count where the spots are. So what you do is you go to each of these spots in turn, in the same direction each year. You don't start at one side one year and the other side at the other. They want this to be very comparable. They want you to be hitting the spots at about the same time every year. You start a timer. You run that timer for 3 minutes. I'm gonna admit someone there. You run that timer for 3 minutes, and you count every bird you can for 3 minutes. You're not allowed to pitch. You're not allowed to play any recordings. You're not allowed to make little sucking noises through your teeth, anything to try to coax or entice or get the birds excited. You stand there, you listen for 3 minutes, you write down all the birds, you get back in your car and you move on. And you do that 50 times. And if you do that, you'll have covered 24.5 miles, and then you're done. So that generally takes you from about 6 o'clock in the morning to, if you're really, clicking and on a good rhythm, It could take you till 10:30, 10:45 in the morning. Hopefully you're getting a nice rhythm going and can do that. It's satisfying to do it efficiently, in my opinion. And then you count all the birds that are alive. You don't count eggs. If you find a nest, you don't count birding. You don't count begging juveniles. They have to be some birds that are plausibly breeding. I started doing these later, in my birding career. I've done 2 routes since 2016. We had 1 cancellation year. They did not have us go out in 2020 when, at the peak of the pandemic and before all the vaccines and everything. My 2 routes are Citrus Park, which is in Hillsborough County, and then another route named San Antonio, which starts in Pasco County and ends way over in Polk County. It mostly runs from west to east, so I end up over in Polk County by the end of that one. Citrus Park, I'm sure, was lovely and lightly developed when it was started. But now by the time I'm doing it, it's very well built up, and I get some exciting birds in the morning, and then you're really kind of battling car noise as the day moves on. That you can really only do Sunday's the best day to do these breeding bird surveys once there's any development, because like I say here on the second bullet point, road noise is your biggest enemy. When you have 3 minutes to count all the birds, you're not getting them visually. You're listening, and that's the main way you're counting them and recording them. They give you a little training, and there's some nice auditory birding training that you get. They want you to start with some knowledge in that area. But it definitely, ear birding is what you need to be doing when you're doing a 3-minute location count. This is the least social of the various citizen science projects I've been involved with, but sometimes that's pretty nice. You get to go out, you try to work efficiently, and you try to complete your project, and then get the information into the database. I see Lois has got a question. Yes, ma'am.
Could you, because you're trying to do an audible recording, could you run Merlin for the 3 minutes and use that as to count the bird sounds that you hear? Because it usually gives you a list of everything that it's heard as a backup.
Yeah, that is an outstanding question. I don't know the answer to that question. I would speculate that the answer to that question is no, but I don't know that. So it would be interesting to know if I see the answer to that question or can find a way to ask someone at the Breeding Bird Survey, I will. The reason I speculate that the answer is no is because that would have such a huge effect on the comparability of the data through time, right? It's important to the science of it that you not in a year or in some years have a sudden quantum leap in the ability to identify the birds at a particular location. It would potentially skew the data by skewing the quality of the collection. That having been said, I am not a scientist, and that is just Charlie's guess as to what the scientists would say. But what an interesting question, Lois. I don't know, and if I find out, I'll let you know. So you get a nice package mailed to you with your instructions every year. They send you the same maps that you've had before. You can see where you've stapled and unstapled them many times. And then you fill out that information after you've done the survey, and then you upload the information into a database as well, package it back up and mail it back. I think that I'm sure that the months are different in different parts of the country. I'm sure they start later and end later as you go further north. But in Florida, at least the peninsular Florida, where my two survey routes are, I need to complete them sometime between May 1st and June 30th. And truth be told, I really kind of need to do them in May, because you're definitely hearing less bird singing and things as you get into June. I'm going to try to do one this weekend, actually. This data set, I think, is probably easier for scientists to use because it was designed from the get-go by a scientist. And there are a lot more rails around the circumstances under which the data is collected, in terms of location, in terms of dates, in terms of the amount of time and how the effort is expended, right? The expended effort could be just all over the place in a Christmas bird count. But in a breeding bird survey, Jan Robbins said from get-go, you got 3 minutes, count everything you can. And then when the clock goes off, I don't care how good the bird is, you don't write it down. And so for that reason, it's more scientifically relevant. My understanding is that data was also really important for the Rosenberg study and the Audubon study on the effects of global warming on bird populations. Oh dear, this is too much. But this describes some more of the use of the data for scientific and conservation purposes. I'll just skip down here to where it says that the BBS data have contributed to the evaluation of management actions and informing the management specifically of mourning doves, wood ducks, and golden eagles. So specifically useful in conservation and also in scientific endeavors. Okay, on to one of our more recent ones, eBird. I'll go real fast. eBird started just in 2002. It started out in the United States, worldwide by 2010. The main organization behind it, although they have a lot of generous partners who help them, is the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. And this is a project that has absolutely exploded. Exponential growth, 20% a year, and there are 100 million sightings contributed annually now. This is an incredible database, heavily used by the scientific community, heavily used by the birding community. There were 3 people who, it seems to me, were particularly important in the development of this project. I just know a little bit about that because I'll skip ahead on a slide. My own first involvement with eBird came in, I think I signed up for it in October of 2003. Now, I had only been a bird watcher for about 6 weeks, and I don't remember signing up for eBird, but I signed up for eBird during the 2003 Florida Birding and Nature Festival that Ann referred to, and the festival that we, the Grand We, have brought back over the course of the last number of years. The 2003 Florida Birding and Nature Festival was held in South Pinellas County, down by Eckerd College, and somewhere at that festival, which is the first birding festival I ever went to, the first birding anything I went to, somebody must have said something about eBird, because that's when I signed up for it. And I used it a few times, and I can tell you it was very forgettable. It was really hard to use. The maps were a nightmare. Now it's really easy to use the maps and map functions. But the 3 people that came onto the project after I signed up for it in 2003 generally between 2005 and 2007, were Chris Wood, Brian Sullivan, and then Marshall Iliff. And one of the decisions that they made was they talked to the Cornell people and they said, we know you want this incredible scientific database. We need to get a lot of people excited about using it. We need to make it really useful to birders. We need to make birders want to interact with this thing. So we need to make it easier to use, and we need to make it more useful to them. We need to have it be able to produce reports for them on where they saw different things and where they can share information on things that they saw. And maybe eventually where they can share video clips and audio clips and photographs. But beyond that, you science people, you're going to want the audio and the photo clips. You're going to want all of these things and the high quality mapping. It's all going to make the science work better, and it's going to make the birders want to use it. And it was around that time that it absolutely blew up. And that's about when I started using it again, because it was a pain in the rear in 2003. So what the scientists want us to do when we use eBird, they don't absolutely make us do this, but they want us to do this, and we should, because it's better for us as, for our lists and everything as birders as well. They want lists that are geographically specific, not I was in Hillsborough County. They want to know exactly where you were. They want to know the time and date. You have to put those in. I mean, you can't create a list at all without the date. That's a minimum piece of information. They would prefer that it be complete. A lot of birders back in the day would leave out birds they didn't really like. They didn't like Muscovy ducks, or I'm not going to count starlings or whatever. No, eBird, they want to know all the birds. Actual or estimated. Estimated is actually fine with them. If you make a list like that has that information, geography, time and date specific, complete list with the numbers of individuals, that's a complete list. And that's a list that can then be used scientifically. You can make casual lists, but they aren't going to get used in the science database. They're deprecated for that purpose. So yeah, it's gotten a lot better. And I went on a family trip to Costa Rica, and I did a lot of birding when I was on that trip, and I decided to use eBird on it. And then that resold me on the whole thing. It was fantastic. Now we have all these great apps, and you can use it on your phone. There was an app called Bird Log that interacted with eBird at first, and I used it, and it cost $10 or something. And then I think that the eBird people realized, hey, we need to get Android and iPhone apps out that have been created in-house. We need to get everybody using it this way. This is going to be also, keeping it growing exponentially, and it's absolutely true. I think eBird absolutely changed me as a birder, made me a better birder, and has helped me interact with the birding community, being able to see what birds are out there and around. And I know that the data is important and useful scientifically as well. It feels good to bird with a purpose and know that if I go birding on a Wednesday afternoon for the last hour of the day, that I might be just taking a pleasure walk and hoping I see some cool birds, but it'll add to a great scientific database as well. eBird, well, let's see, they haven't given any data here other than hundreds of conservation decisions and peer-reviewed papers. And it just seems like so many of the scientific papers that I see, not that I read a lot of them, do mention eBird data and source a lot. And it's pretty straightforward to download the database. And I'm sure that they have good tools for the scientists to use to really mine that database as well. Oh man. 8:10. Do you think I can do this in 5 minutes, or are you guys done?
Go ahead, Charlie. People will stay on as long. You still got quite a crowd hanging in.
All right,
So go ahead.
I'm gonna pick up the pace and make sure that I don't bore you all with my last 5 minutes. So the last project I wanted to tell you about was the Florida Breeding Bird Atlas #2. We had a Florida Breeding Bird Atlas #1. It was a project of the Florida Ornithological Society, an organization near and dear to my heart as a bird science oriented organization, and supported by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, among other agencies. My understanding is that the first Breeding Bird Atlas got a lot of agency support. We had less for the second, but things are what they are. The agencies did, I'm sure, what they could. The first one ran from 1986 to 1991. That was before my time as a birder. I could have been a birder by then. I was certainly grown up enough, but I hadn't found it yet. The data accumulated in the first Florida Breeding Bird Atlas is still available at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission website. And it really is a great resource. There are wonderful species accounts and maps that show you where different species of birds breed in Florida. And if you just want to find some quick information on what birds breed in Florida where, that's still one of the best places to quickly turn. But after 25 years, it was time to do another one. It seems like that's kind of roughly the time frame that many of the big atlases work on. About every 25 years, they get redone. And the Ornithological Society, FOS, decided to run a second one. And that one ran from 2011. The field work ran from 2011 to 2016. The 5 years of principal data collection, 2012 through 2016, and 2011 as kind of a gear up and getting things ready year. But in the first Breeding Bird Atlas, there were not, thinking at that time frame, 1986 to 1991, there weren't really internet-based tools or much in the way of distributed computer databases for people to use. But by 2011, the U.S. Geological Survey had created a database that had been used for 5 or 6 atlases before. It was kind of pre-built, ready to go, and they were ready to lend that support. So we used that database for the atlas, and it was, as a participant, it was kind of central to my interaction with the atlas, because you'd gather up your information. The maps were there, which I'll talk about in a second, and that's where you would input your data. So how does a BBA work? Well, of course, you really want comparability through time as a central principle of your science. If you want to be able to meaningfully compare things, you need to make sure that they're kind of established on the same basis. So a lot of the protocols that were established with the first Breeding Bird Atlas, well, they were pretty well, therefore, locked in for the second Breeding Bird Atlas. Breeding Bird Atlas, very different from these first 3 projects that we talked about, which are all about numbers of birds, on a particular day. Breeding Bird Atlas is much more about areas and breeding status. You're not counting birds for these. They're surveys of breeding activity. And they, you do these atlas surveys when the birds are breeding. So those can vary a lot. They would establish for us the breeding seasons for different species of birds, and that's when you would go out and look for the breeding evidence. And so, for example, great horned owls, the season established for us was a long one, October through June. Northern cardinals, May through August 15th. So it ended up being a year-round thing. Obviously, most breeding activity, in Florida is going to be centered on, let's say April 15th through July 15th. but there's plenty of breeding activity outside of that window as well. They're area and species oriented, not numbers oriented. So maps and geography become extremely important, and they become more your guiding lights. So back long ago, I think the U.S. Geological Survey was, began its mapping of the United States back in the 19th century. But in 1947, they came up with with their 7.5 minute quadrangle map project. And from 1947 for several decades after that, the entire United States was mapped in this 1 to 24,000 scale topographic maps, which were then called quadrangles. These quad maps are probably the most popular maps that the USGS ever created. And the quad maps are what the Breeding Bird Atlas is built off of. So Florida is comprised of 1,039 quads, at least the way the quadrangles were placed by the USGS when they mapped Florida. So every quad has a name based on some kind of feature that's in the quadrangle map. So in Hillsborough County, there is a Citrus Park quad. There is a Tampa quad. So for the Breeding Bird Atlas, we then take each of these 7.5 minute minutes in arc areas, and we divide it into 6 blocks. So imagine 2 columns, and running from top to bottom, starting on the west side, 1, 2, 3, and then you go over to the top of the second column, 4, 5, 6. Because quad map is a pretty big area, so breaking it into sixths is more manageable. So what you do then, again, for scientific rigor, they randomly selected one of those blocks to be the priority block, and that's the place where you do most of the birding and do most of your seeking of the breeding activity. So the priority block, there were 2 priority blocks in BBA 1, and I think they decided for BBA 2 that they just wanted 1 priority block, and the block that had been covered most heavily, I think, in BBA 1 was block 6. So block 6 was the priority block for BBA 2. And when you went out to survey a quad, you mostly birded in block 6. Some supplementary projects were added as well to this particular Breeding Bird Atlas. They wanted us in each priority block to run a breeding bird survey-like mini route, a 15-stop analog of the classic 50-stop breeding bird survey route. There was also a project that focused on 20 listed focal species, and if you found one of these focal species, like I think black skimmer was one of them, then you gave some additional data on that sighting. I think mostly I think it was the exact location. So the idea was you'd complete your survey of the priority block, and then you would visit other habitats in the rest of the quad, particularly if they weren't represented in the priority block. Maybe you didn't have a wetland in the priority block, and you wanted to see if you could add some wetland breeding species. Then you would add those. So what you were basically trying to do, to summarize it, you birded block 6 like crazy. You ran a mini route. Then you did extra birding in the quad for missing habitats mostly. And you're told, you could consider it done by the time you got at least 75% of the species on a confirmed basis. that were in the previous survey. And it was thought that that would be something like 3 mornings or 15 hours to kind of get that initial work done. So what are you writing down? You're not writing down the numbers of birds. You're not writing down exactly where you saw them other than a particular block. What were you recording? You were recording categories associated with breeding status, observations of breeding. So there were 4 categories. There was observed, that just meant you saw the bird. There was possible breeding. That means there was something seen that indicated that bird had breeding potential in that area. Probable, so a higher level of confidence on that. And confirmed, that means you knew the bird bred in the block. And there were multiple codes for each of these categories. So an example of observed would be, you saw the bird, there's no evidence of breeding. You see a least sandpiper somewhere in Florida in June, they don't breed here. They breed much, much further north, not close to here at all. So that would just be an observed bird. Possible, SH, code SH, suitable habitat. You see a northern mockingbird, in a suburban neighborhood. Yes, they breed in suburban neighborhoods, but maybe you don't see another bird or any other kind of evidence of breeding. So that would be a suitable habitat. Probable, okay. There was 7 singing males. If you saw 7 singing males in a block, that counted as probable. You saw a pair interacting together as a couple. That would be probable. Territorial behavior, some kind of antagonistic behavior, chasing another bird off. One red-winged blackbird male chases another one off, pecking at its tail. C, courtship or copulation. See that? And then that would also put it in probable. V was the visiting of nest holes by woodpeckers or chickadees, some other cavity nesting bird. A, agitated behavior. Kind of sounds like T, but it could just be general agitation as well. B, brood patch. You don't really see that unless you hold the bird in hand, but then you can see the brood patch that they use to worm eggs. And then nest building. If they're spending their time building nests, that's a probable indicator of breeding. And then there's the gold standard, confirmed. So if you saw one of these, you had confirmed breeding. A distraction display, where the bird's really putting its life and health at risk. It's not going to do that unless there's actually young. Used nests or eggshells, clear evidence that the breeding happened and new birds came out there. FE, female with egg and oviduct. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't find that unless you held the bird in your hand. Fledged young. This was a common one for confirmation. CF, carrying food. So you would see this sometimes, see a common grackle with food in its mouth, diving into some thicket. They usually, if you just see them, they gobble it right down, but they were obviously taking the bird to a bird they cared about. ON, adults on nest. I think that one makes sense. FS, adult carrying fecal sac. This is another one you don't see it unless you're looking for it. And then once you start looking for it, you see it all the time. A bird will fly out from some hidden position with a white or yellow-white doodad in its mouth, and it'll fly off somewhere, get rid of it, and then you see it fly back. It doesn't have it in its mouth anymore. Okay, it was getting rid of the baby's feces. IP, incubating position, so maybe you're watching shorebirds on a rooftop and you see them squatting down onto, what would seem to be eggs on one of those Florida roofs. That would be an indication. NE, nest with eggs, or NY, nest with young seen or heard. Again, those were confirmed, and that's what you really wanted to get. You were excited when you saw that. So how did I get involved in this? Dave Goodwin came to me in 2011, and he said, this thing is coming up. This is going to be one of the most fun birding projects you will ever be involved with. You are going to go to places in Florida that you've never been to before, that you never would go to if you weren't involved in a project like this. This project makes you do it. You're going to see places you otherwise weren't going to see. And then you're going to do a completely different kind of birding. Right? You're not going to be counting the birds. You count them while you're out there, but that's not the point of it. You're going to be watching the birds, trying to see them engaged in certain critical biological behavior, something that's really important to them. And so you're going to be birding in a very different way. It's behavior oriented rather than watch, count, move on kind of oriented. And all of those things were so true. I found it to be a really valuable and interesting experience. I certainly learned a lot about funny corners of Florida. Very much enjoyed it. And on this one, I had no leadership or role whatsoever. I was purely a foot soldier and put in plenty of hours doing it, and drove hither and yon. Some parts of the state didn't get covered a lot, or they didn't get savvy to the atlas until later. I spent a lot of time in Collier County, which is gigantic, and really needed a lot of coverage. And so I helped a lot down there, tons in Hillsborough. It was exciting and a lot of fun. Now, my understanding is that now the USGS database is kind of dormant, but you can see, if you're an eBird user, those breeding bird codes, and a lot of breeding bird atlas work is just being done straight out of eBird these days. That's probably where the data collection is going to go. So the field work finished in 2016. The project has been taking a while to bake, but it really sounds like it's getting far advanced now. There is a library and archive group at the University of South Florida that's very interested in hosting the scientific results, the maps, the species accounts, once we have them all complete. And I'm excited that the leadership has a lot of neat things that they'll be able to do with it. And I was just delighted to be involved on the field side, although I'm going to get to write a little bit of species account. That'll be fun. So these citizen science projects, they're personally very fulfilling, gratifying. I know that I'm a better birder from having been involved with them. I know that I'm more informed and have a better understanding of the scientific process. I've just been delighted to be involved with them. And I would encourage you all to consider participation, because I think you'll find that it's very gratifying and a whole lot of fun. Questions, or is everybody just dog tired? Sorry, I went over.
That's okay. So I was just looking at the to see if there are any questions. All right. Yeah, no, I don't think we have any questions in the chat.
Gotcha.
Does anybody else have a question? You could unmute yourself and ask Charlie. Well, we have him here.
This is John. Let me turn on the camera. This is Jonathan, and thank you for the excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that the thing that, I've done eBird quite a bit, but the thing that I've never heard of is a birding by car and stopping every half a mile to take a count. And it sounds, honestly, like a lot of fun. And how do you sign up for something like that?
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, if I can get your email address, I'll give you the contact name for the person in Florida to reach out to. Now, I think I know that the breeding bird survey for this year, 2022, has already started, but you could certainly get involved and set up and choose a route and get going for next year. And I know that there are routes in Florida that are not covered. So if you're willing to take on the challenge of just doing a little bit of that auditory birding training and take on the challenge of being somewhere at about 6 o'clock in the morning to run your route.
Hey,
And
I'm a retired sailor. I can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
All right. Absolutely. That's a piece of cake.
And I dropped my email in the chat.
Great. I will get that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I made a note of that, Charlie. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple of comments. Tina said she's tired, but she's really happy and enjoyed the talk. Thank you. And Trudy also said, thank you for the work you do. And Patty Moore said, thank you also. And does anybody else have a question for Charlie? If you do, unmute yourself and speak up.
Charlie, are you doing Fort DeSoto by boat then? I looked at the circle.
Fort DeSoto, the Fort DeSoto count. I cover I'm the sector leader on Egmont Key and Passage Key. So it's hit or miss. I'd say 1 year in 3, the seas are up enough that we can't get out there. Some years, and the agency has been able to get us out on the boat, but most years we have to take the Egmont Key ferry.
Yeah.
And if the weather's not good, they just cancel. But that's what we generally do. We generally go out on the Egmont Key ferry, and we cover it from 10 to 2, and then go back.
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you, Charlie. This was wonderful. We all really enjoyed it. I think we all learned a lot. And you've given us something to think about. And it's very, very great talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Sorry it took so long.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We'll see
Good
you on
night,
the,
everybody.
what, the 21st, Charlie?
The 21st. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man.
Love Lower Green Swamp.
Have you been out there? Because they burned it twice. I'm
I have
curious.
not. I know you
Yeah.
indicated to me that they had done a burn.
Yeah, there was I forget the guy's name now, but one of our talkers was about controlled burns, and I signed up for alerts. And so like Little Manatee River was burned today.
Okay.
It can be a useful thing for anybody who's going seriously birding all the time to know ahead of time. All right, that's just an observation question. And I'll share the list with you before time. I'll send an email out, touch base with you the week before, like that Monday or Tuesday.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in June.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great talk.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Say good night, Gracie. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now.
Okay, great. That was great. Thanks, Mick.